Think you know the Bible? Think again. Tune in as Rabbi Bentzi Epstein and Tom Levine reveal the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary in Breakneck Through the Bible by Torch Dallas. Each episode may cover just a few verses, but don't let that fool you. Get ready to learn the Bible at a breakneck pace.
We're on page 35 in Bereshit, starting on verse 17. When the flood was on the earth 40 days, the waters increased and raised the ark so that it was lifted above the earth.
Right, so the waters came, remember, the waters now are coming from the depths, opening up from the, we'll call it from the windows of the heaven, whatever that means. And then it was rain itself 40 days and 40 nights. Why did it rain for 40 days and 40 nights? Because we know the flood, from the time they went until the time they came out, was exactly a year later. But it rained for 40 days and 40 nights.
So you're saying that the rain started before the flood?
No. Well, yes and no. It first started off as rain, not a flood, right? And it could have been turned into rains of blessings if one person would have changed their behavior, right? Would have changed their mind, would have done tshuva, but they didn't. And then it just started gushing water from below and from above, and the rain rained for 40 days and 40 nights.
So I hear you saying there was a 320-ish difference here. If it rained for 40 days, but you said the flood lasted a year.
Mm-hmm.
I see. The rain stopped, but the flood persisted for a year.
And the water, correct, means the water, even after it stopped raining, the water kept on getting higher and higher. And then at a certain point in time, it peaked, and then it started going back down.
I see. And so that duration was 1 year.
Correct. From the time Noah went in till Noah and his family, and till Noah walked out, was exactly a year.
And why is that significant?
So it's interesting. So the year is that it was actually the Hebrew calendar is 355 days, 354 and a half, which is 355 days, which is why the Hebrew word for year is shana, right? Shana tova, like have a good year. The word shana is shin nun hey, which is 355, because there are 355 days in a year. So the word for year is...
Can you just give our audience a quick lesson on gematria and what you mean by the value?
Okay. The Lashon HaKodesh, right, the language that the Torah is written in, does not have a separate numerical counting system. So, for example, in English, you have the ABCs. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. In every language, you have that. Even in Roman, you have, right, I, IV, right, L, M, N, X.
Roman numerals.
Roman numerals that are numbers. So they're specific for, even though it might be letters, but it's representing numbers. In the Hebrew language, you have the 22 letters, Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, etc. And your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is also Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Ches, Tes, Yud. Aleph is 1, Beis is 2, Gimel is 3, Dalet is 4, it gets up to 10, then 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, Kuf is 100. Then you have Reish and Taf, which is 200, 300, and 400. And those are all the Hebrew numbers.
So in math, in Hebrew, would it be like Aleph plus Aleph equals...
Beis. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it'd be. Okay? That would be if you... So the Torah is written with Hebrew letters. So there becomes a fundamental question. Am I ready for a plot twist here? Are there letters that are also numbers, Or are they really numbers that are also letters?
Good.
So, for example, let's just play this out, what that looks like. So if I ask you what the first word in the Torah is, you say, what do you mean? Bereshis, in the beginning. And I'll say, well, not so fast. Because maybe the first word in the Torah is 2, 200, 1, 300, 10, 400.
Which is the numerical value of each
of those letters
of Bereshis.
Of Bereshis, right? Beis is 2, so it's 2. Resh is 200, so be 200. Aleph is 1. And then Shin is 300. Yud is 10, and Taf is 400. And so that becomes a real mind bender. And if you understood what the numbers mean, so for example, the number 1, what is the number 1 symbolic of?
Hashem.
God, right? God is one and only. What's interesting is the letter Aleph, right? It's read as Aleph, Aleph Lamed Pei, which actually means aluf. What's an aluf? General. So it's one, but it's actually read as aluf, general. And even the letter Aleph itself is actually made up of 3 letters. There's a Yud on the top, there's a Vav in the middle, and there's a Yud on the bottom. Which just so happens, Yud is 10 and Vav is 6. And Yud is 10, which is 26. And God's ephemeral name, I guess, the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey, is a numerical value of 26. So actually, the Aleph itself is made up of letters that are 26. And what's even super cooler than that is that there are 10 spiritual worlds and then there are 10 physical worlds. And the Vav means and, which is kind of cute, because the letter Vav is like a hook, which you hang things on, which is a connector. So Vav is a connector. So you have a Vav connecting the 10 upper words and the 10 lower spheres, and connecting it with godliness, or infusing the entire world with godliness. So if you really understand the letters and how they're scripted and what they're meant for, the Torah becomes an unbelievable read.
So many deeper meanings.
Oh my gosh, it's just crazy. And so when we ascribing the letters as numbers rather than as letters, it's called gematria, okay, which is the numerical value. Okay, so the word shana, for example, which means year, is shin, which is 300, nun, which is 50, and hey, which is 5. Because there are 354 and a half days in a year. So there are 355 days in the Jewish calendar, as opposed to the solar calendar, right, or the American calendar, which has 365 and a quarter days. So the American calendar is like 11 days longer. For keeping track of time, the solar calendar is easier, meaning that March 25th, 2025 is going to be the same as March 25th, 2026, 2027. Sunrise is going to be the same time, sundown is going to be the same day. In the Hebrew calendar, if the 26th of Adar, right, 5,785, but 5,786, the 25th of Adar is going to be, sunrise is going to be at a different time. Right? There's always slippage, which is why the Ramadan calendar, which is on the lunar calendar, keeps on moving 11 days earlier every year. And so that's kind of why it cycles through the year. We Jews, in order to keep that all aligned, we go ahead and we add in 7 leap months every 19 years. So roughly once every 3 years, we have what's called a leap year. But instead of like in the solar calendar, that means adding a day. In our calendar, it means adding a month. And that way then we and that's another 29 and a half days divided by 3. So that's roughly your same 10-day slippage that you have. So when the flood lasted 365 days, not 355, it was an extra 11 days to make sure that it was a complete year, that the world sort of was put in limbo and starting again.
Okay, good.
That's the short answer to why you asked me the flood lasted here. But why did it rain for 40 days and 40 nights? So it rained for 40 days and 40 nights is because the world was they were sexually uncontrollable, and they forced God to forced in quote unquote, to make many babies out in creating many bastards, right? Because if a woman was married and then she has relations with a man, not her husband, and she gets pregnant from that, the kid is a bastard. That's literally the definition of a bastard. And so God had to create that, right? I don't want to say we made God, but right, again, in quote unquote.
Right.
And so we made God, right, to create these bastards. So therefore it rained for 40 days and 40 nights.
So I'm still unclear how you're getting the relationship between the 40 days and creating the bastards.
Oh, okay, because the child gets formed in 40 days.
So not birthed.
Not birthed, formed, right? And what's interesting is that the heartbeat comes 40 days after conception. The sex of the child is decided 40 days after conception. And, there are certain things that happen at day 40 in the development of the fetus.
So at what point is the soul entered the fetus?
So the soul gets attached to the fetus at day 40.
Oh, and Dave, okay, good.
And that's when the heart beats. It's kind of pretty cool. As we say in Judaism, that while the soul is with the fetus, that what's it doing? Right? What's it doing for the 9 months, 8 months? And the answer is it's being taught Torah by the angel inside the womb. If you could imagine a miniature Garden of Eden going on inside a pregnant woman's uterus.
So is there any relationship to the 40 days that the fetus, the unborn child, is learning Torah, to the 40 days that Moses went up the...
And so the child starts learning Torah at day 40, right? When the soul comes at day 40 for the rest of its pregnancy.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting is that the number 40 seems to appear a lot, right? Because the woman is pregnant 40 weeks. Day 40 gets the heartbeat. Day 40, the soul comes attached to it. Moses was on the mountain for 40 days. The Jews were in the desert for 40 years. Moses,
kind of like a reoccurring theme here.
Reoccurring theme. And the answer is that the idea of 40 is a completion, right? And again, just to show you, since we were talking about gematria, what letter is 40? Mem. Okay. Mem is 40. And what is the letter Mem? Like what's the word that's used for the letter Mem? Mayim, which is water. And so 40 is a complete cycle. And that's why you go to the mikvah, which is water, to mark the cycle. Right? So the 40, so it makes now a lot of sense. 40 weeks inside, because that's a cycle. 40 days is a cycle of creation. 40 years in the desert, we transitioned in the desert to learning Torah. So you keep on seeing 40, 40, 40, 40. So it's not just arbitrary number 40, but the idea is that 40 is a cycle or a complete cycle.
So let me ask you, Rabbi, we're living in tumultuous times. I've said this before. Given the whole pro-choice, pro-life movement, as it relates to Judaism, does the fetus really appears to become a person on the 40th day?
Yes.
So does Judaism have to what extent is there a problem on abortion prior to the 40th day?
So that's a great question. Right? And it's a big discussion.
I mean,
but clearly,
killing anything anytime is not good. But
right. And clearly, what the discussion when it comes to abortion to have is when does life start? That's the real discussion, because anything less than that is really not addressing the issue. Like people say, well, it's a woman's right to choose. The answer is no, it's not. I mean, she could kill somebody because it's her right to choose. We don't allow that. She can't kill herself. It's illegal. Right? You can't commit suicide. Right? Meaning, so that's not the discussion. The discussion that needs to have is when does life start? And that
appears to be at day 40.
That's when you have the connection between the soul and the body, which is probably how I would define life. And then so your question of what happens before day 40. So again, it's something that we know is coming to be a live human being, right? But might not yet be a human being. So in the Talmud has a discussion, is it really day 40? Some opinions are day 3.
Why day 3?
So there
Okay,
are two opinions. Beyond the scope of...
Stay tuned,
right?
audience, for...
right, but that's... So, but day 3 or day 40. But that's the discussion.
But clearly, after day 40, there's no debate.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why... And so the world had bothered God to create these bastards, these illegitimate children. And so the punishment was that it's going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. Like that's what's going to happen. Okay. Right? Okay. So that's why 40 days and 40 nights.
18. The waters strengthened and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark drifted upon the surface of the waters.
Very interesting. What was the one piece of the boat that is every boat needs that this boat didn't have?
A rudder.
A rudder, right. So why did God... Now,
because we weren't going anywhere.
Oh my gosh. Have you ever been in a boat that doesn't have a rudder?
I can't say that I have.
Thank God. But if you don't use the rudder, seasickness is not the word, right?
Oh, so you're saying also for balance.
Also for balance, and like you want to meet the waves head on, and here not. So why was there no rudder on the boat?
Because God was directing its path.
Ah, very good. So God was saying, you are completely in my control. And you will go exactly where I take you. And you will not go exactly where I don't take you.
So do you think there was ever a dialogue or question that Noah had for the 100 years that he was 120 years that he was building the boat. And he said, "Oh my gosh, I forgot the rudder."
Well, God told him how it's supposed to look.
Okay.
So there was no rudder.
And he never questioned that.
It doesn't tell us that he did. Okay, I'm sure he did. God says, "You're putting yourself in my hands."
Yeah. I suppose if he's bought into building the ark, then you're already all in.
I would assume so.
Yeah. He's not going to debate, can we have 2 windows instead of 1?
Right. Or it's funny. Like one question I always had was, how did Noah pay for everything for the ark?
Good.
And as far as I know, the Torah doesn't talk about it, right?
God provided the materials.
Right, that's the answer. The answer is that if God tells you to do something, he's going to give you the tools that you need to do it. So sometimes you say, well, I need this. And the answer is maybe not, because God didn't give it to you. Which is a fascinating way to look at life. God gives us what we need. It says, well, I didn't have my Mercedes to drive around in. Oh, maybe God's telling you don't need a Mercedes. He said, but I need it. The answer is maybe. Let's look at what God gives us, and then we can understand what we need or don't need. Now, don't go ahead and making any assumptions.
And yet, when you look at Adam in the Garden of Eden, God did not give Adam a lush garden. He gave Adam the need to pray for rain to deliver the lush garden.
Correct.
So we have to be careful that we don't get confused maybe with God not having given us the end result, but he has given us the process or the mechanism to acquire it.
Very good. Very good. And you could pray for your Mercedes.
I haven't found that one in the sitter yet.
No, it's there, right? Right? That we could pray for a Mercedes, right? But if God only gives us a Kia, right? A Hyundai, right?
You're not saying we did something wrong.
Right. So maybe it wasn't the Mercedes that
we needed to pray harder.
We had to pray harder. So the answer is either pray harder, or the answer is, or you don't need it. So you're praying for the wrong thing.
Good.
And that really becomes, what do I need? Why do I need it? What can I use it for? Etc. etc.
Very good. The waters strengthened and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark drifted upon the surface of the waters.
Totally in God's hands.
The waters strengthened very much upon the earth. All the high mountains which are under the entire heavens were covered.
Okay, and now, so the ark was 11 cubits in the water. Right? It was a laden boat, so it was 11 cubits in the water. Right? It was 30 cubits high, so it was a third of the way in the water. Okay? So the water, and so now it's becoming stronger. It's even over the tallest mountain, right? It's going to, the water covers all of that, and it's covered up.
15 cubits upward did the waters strengthen, and the mountains were covered. And all flesh that moves upon the earth expired, among the birds, the animals, and the beasts, and all the creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all mankind, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life, of everything that was on dry land died. And Rabbi, maybe we'll come to it, but I'm thinking of Og.
Okay.
Is that later or is
No, it's verse 23. But read verse 21 and 22 again, okay?
21? And all flesh that moves upon the earth expired, among the birds, the animals, the beasts, and all creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all mankind.
I just wanted to, one other point that I want to make,
Sure.
which is important to know. So where was the flood?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Entire world was flooded. What about Israel?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it's very interesting, right? That
Because was there in Israel at this point? God hadn't given it yet to the Jewish people.
well, there weren't the Jewish people around, right?
Okay.
But we are going to see that Noach, right, when he walks out of the ark and owns the entire world.
Walked out in Israel?
No, but he gives his son Shem, who is the Jewish people's great-great-great-grandfather, he gives him Israel. So the answer is that it flooded the entire world. It rained everywhere except Israel. And then the water spilled over into the land of Israel. So Israel was covered with water, but it wasn't as destructive as the rest of the world. Because the water kind of spilled over, but it wasn't like getting scrubbed in that place.
And how do we know this?
How do we know this? We know this from the oral law.
Okay.
Right? But that's just, it's interesting because in the Torah it doesn't say it. I kept remember to say this. So that's a good question. So, right, so the water, right, and it's interesting because in verse 19 it says, and the water strengthened very much upon the earth, right? That this water was very tumultuous and very destructive.
You know, Rabbi, this might be a good opportunity to pause just for a small deviation, because many in our listening audience might not understand the relationship between what you mean by the written law and the oral law. And we reference the oral law maybe enough that if you could just take a minute and explain the two sources.
Sure. So the written law is the Tanakh, right? Okay, the 5 books of Moses, the book of Judges, book of Joshua, Judges, Samuel, Kings, right? Jeremiah, Isaiah, Ezekiel, right? Trei Asar, right? The 12, and then you have book of Psalms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have the 24 books of the written Torah. The problem is how do you know what the words mean? Meaning, how do you know what lo sirtzach means? Does the word tirtzach mean kill? Which how many people translate you shall not kill? Or does it really mean you shall not murder? Right? Because tirchatz is murder. And so what happens is that you really have the concept of killing and murdering, two totally different things. And the Torah says you shall not murder, not you shall not kill. So how do you know anything that the Torah says? What does it mean?
If I can give an example, one that always has come to my mind, it says you should get married, but it doesn't explain how or what that really means.
Correct. Right, and how do you go about getting married, right? So a guy has to find a woman, right? And what happens? They just shack up? Or, right, does he have to...
Hence the oral Torah.
Hence the oral law on how to do it. Right? There's a whole tractate called Tractate of Marriage. That's what it is. Right? You have to know how to do it. How does he go about doing it?
So where did we get this?
So when Moses... So two things. The written law... I love the people that say, Rabbi, I only believe in the written law, not the oral law. And I just laugh. They say, why are you laughing? I said, well, how do you know what's in the written law? They said, well, take out a stone chumash and read it. I said, yeah, but that's not the written law. The written law is you take out a Torah scroll that's in the ark, and there are no punctuations and there are no vowels. So how do you even know how to read it and where to put in the punctuations? My favorite is you think it says lo sirtach, don't murder. I said, no, you're just reading it wrong. No, murder, right? You put a nice little comma there, you change the whole meaning of the sentence. So even how you're going to read it, you need an oral law. So everyone agrees you need an oral law. They just don't want to do anything that might inconvenience them, and that's why they don't like it. So it was given, you can't have one without the other. Now, Moses was a smart guy. He was on Mount Sinai, and God says, don't murder. And Moses says, great. What does that mean? Let's say somebody throws somebody off the Empire State Building, and then somebody opens up their window on the 50th floor, leans out with the sword, and cuts them in half. Who's the murderer? The one on top or the one on bottom?
Well, I would say the one who was on top.
But he wasn't dead yet.
He wasn't? No, that's...
Right? And so now you say, well, both. And you can't be both. Because the guy, if you're saying the guy on the top is a murderer, so the guy in the window murdered a murdered man already? Obviously, that doesn't work. And, and the questions go on from there. Could you turn somebody off if they're on the heart-lung machine? The questions are numerous. And the only way that we know the answers is because Moses, when he was on the mountain talking to God, God gave him the explanation. And that was handed down orally. And in fact, I say it even better. Even better. People think that we got the written Torah, and then we went ahead, and then we got the oral Torah. In reality, it was the other way around. We got the oral Torah before we got the written Torah. Because when Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, so he got all the laws. He came down, he broke the tablets, went back up for another 40 days and 40 nights, pleaded with God not to kill us. Then he came down, chiseled out a blank second set of tablets, brought them up to God for a third set of 40 days and 40 nights. God inscribed on them. And then at that point in time, he went ahead, and when God inscribed them on them, so then he brought them down. So at that point in time, we had a second set of tablets. We didn't have the Torah. And then over the course of the next 40 years in the desert, Moses is busy writing down paragraph by paragraph when God tells him to inscribe it. So we really only get the complete Torah 40 years at the end of the 40 years in the desert. But we were already studying Torah the whole time in the desert and keeping Torah. So the oral law really comes before the written Torah. And one more wrinkle I'd like to add on, just to make sure that we're all on the same page. Sometimes people say, okay, Rabbi, what's the law? I said, this is the law. They said, well, where does it say it in the Torah? I said, well, this verse says it, and this is how you understand the verse. So they said, well, I don't see that. So if they don't think that that's a good verse, where it should come from, even though the sages in our Talmud said that that's where it comes from, so great. Does that invalidate the law? Or does that just mean we need to find another verse that proves the law that was given to Moses on Mount Sinai?
I agree. I don't think that you can say just because you can't identify that particular source, it invalidates it.
Very good. It doesn't validate the mitzvah. Go find another verse. Great. You want to find a better verse? Go right ahead. But it doesn't invalidate the mitzvah. And so therefore, knowing what the mitzvahs are is something that we really need to learn and really need to know. So that's the oral law. So it talks about the land of Israel. You're asking, how do I know? The answer is it doesn't seem to really talk about it in the Torah. But I'm telling you that the oral law says that this is what happened.
Very good.
And they pay me the big bucks. Okay, not such big bucks.
You wish.
To study, right? So that's by studying the oral law. And only then could you really get to what's really going on.
Which is why you really need a Torah-observant rabbi to walk you through the Torah, like we're doing in this podcast, so you gain that insight of the oral law additionally.
Correct, because if you don't have that tradition, so then you're basically reading the Bible and making up what you think it means, which is quite a treacherous journey.
Dangerous, very dangerous.
Very dangerous. Very dangerous, because at that point in time now, you're going to have to say you understand what God wants you to do, and that makes it a really dangerous journey. Okay, verse 21.
And all flesh that moves upon the earth expired, among the birds, the animals, the beasts, and all the creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all mankind. All in whose nostril was the breath of the Spirit of life, of everything that was on dry land died. And he blotted out all existence that was on the face of the ground, from man to animals, to creeping things, and to the bird of the heavens. They were blotted out from the earth. Only Noah survived, and those with him in the ark. And the water strengthened on the earth 150 days.
Okay, so I have a question. In verse 21, 22, and 23, the Torah goes ahead, and the Torah uses 3 different words for dying. It tells us 3 times that everything died.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not a little bit overkill?
No pun intended.
Yes.
A little bit.
Murdering the murdered.
Especially we know that the Torah doesn't repeat anything just for repetition's sake.
Correct. Right? So, in verse 21, it starts off, all the flesh upon the earth expired. And then in verse 22, everything that was on the dry land died. And then verse 23, and he blotted out.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going on?
Expired, died, blotted.
Right. So I think the answer is as follows. Was everything equally wicked on the earth?
No.
Okay. So did everything equally die?
Yes.
They all died. Did everyone all equally die the same way?
Ah.
The answer is of course not. Because everyone would die based on their level of wickedness.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we see a similarity?
At the
splitting of the Red Sea.
When the Egyptians crossed, the more wicked had a harder death than those that were less wicked.
Correct. The most righteous, quote unquote, the least wicked of them, they died like lead. They sunk straight to the bottom and were dead. The ones that were more wicked, they were like stones in the water. So the stones were up and down a little bit, the first waterboarding techniques, and then they died. And the ones that were most wicked were like straw.
Like a washing machine.
Like a washing machine, up and down, up and down, up and down, being thrown on the bottom of the sea, getting their bones smashed, then being brought up and brought down, and up and down and up and down and up and down, and then they were finally all killed. Right? That's why in the Az Yashir, the song that we praise God and thank God for all the miracles that He did, right? It says, "Telu ka'oferes," right? They sank like lead. It says ka'even or kiteven, right? It uses 3 different words. So similarly over here, I would say, is the Torah is telling us the same thing. Usually the word vayigva is used by righteous. So in verse 21, it says, and all the flesh that moves upon the earth expired, among birds, animals, beasts, and all the creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all mankind. They died right away. They expired, dead. All had aneurysms, dead, right? Or the flood came, just fell swoop, they were gone. Verse 22, all in whose nostrils was the breath of the spirit of life of everything that was in the dry land died. So they were dead. That took a little longer. And then verse 23, and he blotted out. Okay, and in the Hebrew is vayimach. Like that means like to erase, like melt. It just comes total destruction. So those were the ones that were very wicked. Right? And they were, and it actually says, and it's right. It actually used the words blotted out twice, right? That they were blotted out, and he blotted out all existence. And then for the man, right, from the man to animals to creeping things, and to the birds of the heavens, and they were blotted out from the earth. Right, so twice, right, really an expression of total destruction, total being wiped out and blotted out. That's why it says it 3 times.
Okay.
Similarly, to tell us that everyone went based on the level of wickedness.
So then it says, only Noah survived and those
with him in the ark. Oh.
Why just not say only those in the ark survived?
Right. And only Noach are 2 what are called miyuts. Right? One of the way the Talmud, one of the rules, one of the exeges that are used in the study of the Torah is that when there are 2 minimizing phrases, one right after the other, it's coming to add that there was something more.
Oh.
Because, right, ein miyut achar miyut elo l'riboy. There's no miyut, which means making small, after making something small. So the word only is making something small. Noach, it's only Noach. That's also making small. So the only Noach tells you, but something else was there.
Other than his immediate
family.
Aha.
And that we come to the famous story of Og. Right? The giant that's needed for a story later on in the Torah. So Og kind of hung on for the ride of his life, and he survived the ark.
The flood.
Looks to me. Right.
Did he actually get into the ark, or was he just...
No, he was hanging on to the ark.
For a year?
For a year. Right? So he goes ahead, right? And he's able to survive. Now, again, of course, obviously it's a miracle. Right? And obviously everything going on here. Right? But here the Torah is telling you that, understand that even that he was still around, right? And because remember, it also seems that the waters that came here were destructive waters, hot radiation, radioactive, similarly words, and that there's a destruction going on.
Separate from just being immersed in water.
Correct. Yeah. Right, other than just being immersed in water. And remember, and the fish all survived, right? So this is all miraculous events that are taking place again and again and again and again and again and again.
So in the oral Torah, does it call out Og by name?
Yes.
I see. Another example, what you were saying earlier, if you read just the literal words, it would be more difficult to gain that appreciation. You wouldn't see that.
Correct. Now I'd like to share with you an unbelievable idea. Okay? It's worth your entire podcast listening for this idea that I'm going to share with you now. Ready, Tom?
I'm ready.
Put your seatbelt on. So another explanation of only Noach was left was that Noah got hurt in the ark. Now, if you could imagine, you had every animal on board, and everybody's eating schedule. Some eat by day, some eat by night, some eat by dusk, some eat by dawn. So, can you imagine 8 people trying to feed an entire planet? Pretty exhausting.
Yes.
And one day, Noah, as sheer exhaustion, came late to feed the lion. And the lion came. When he came to feed the lion took a chomp out of Noah's thigh. So Noah came out of the ark limping. So the question is, really? Really, God? He comes late once, and this is what happens to him? Where's
the justice?
Where's the justice? Where's the justice in this? Right? How is that fair? How is it that Noah goes ahead and Noah gets slammed? Where's the justice? Poor guy, a year running around, exhausted. Where's the justice? So the simplistic answer is because when you're dealing with the last lion on earth, you can't make mistakes. And I'll tell you a fascinating story. There was once a rabbi who came to speak here, and he spoke about being the last lion on the earth and how we Jews are the last of the Mohicans, and how careful we have to be. Every Jew, we got to make sure that we keep them. And I was walking home, and there was a lady who I had met somewhere, and she happened to be for this speech the first time. And I was walking home with her, and on the way home, on Shabbat, we were walking home, and she goes, "You know, Rabbi, I'm the last lion in my family. You know, my Jewish lineage, I don't have any kids, and it's just ending. I have a kid, but they're not involved." So that's the simplistic answer. But now I'm going to tell you an answer that, you got to get up and dance in the studio with all. The question is, why does God make Noah and his sons and his wife and his daughter-in-laws? Why did he make them feed all the animals? It was a miracle. We know it's a miracle. Even with them trying and running, it was impossible. So why does God make them go ahead and to kind of go through this exercise of feeding the animals? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is like this. This was a time of strict justice. God was destroying the world. He, so to speak, got off his throne of mercy, and he was sitting on his throne of justice. And when God's in the throne of justice, nobody's righteous. We're all flawed. And we should all be killed. So what God did was, he made it that Noah and his family was involved in doing kindness 24/7. Because if you're involved in doing kindness in 24/7, even when God sits on his throne of justice, you will be saved. As it says, what should a person do to save themselves from the birth pangs of the Messiah? He should involve himself in Torah and kindness. Because if you're involved in kindness, that will protect you, even the most tumultuous of times. And for a second, Noach wasn't involved in kindness. And therefore, the strict justice said, kill him. So the lion goes ahead and the lion takes a chomp out of his leg. So why then does he deserve not to be killed? Because when the lion took a chomp out of his leg, the lion got fed from that chomp. And he did a kindness to the lion by feeding from his body.
Wow.
And he was saved. And let me just show you, a reorientation of how we think. Many times in life we go through and say, why is this fair? Why do I have to work so hard? Why do I have to do what I have to do? Right? Everyone else is sitting back and doing this. So why do I always have to be on the giving end? Why am I always have to give charity? Why do I always have to do kindness? And the question we need to ask ourselves is, who is being kind to who? You think by giving charity that you're being kind? Maybe the poor person who's taking your money is being kind to you. So you now have the merit of kindness.
Wow, it's a great way of looking at it, Rabbi.
And I think if we live our life on that level of kindness, or that to understand, what merit do we have to have what we have? And the answer generally is, it's just God's kindness. That's the answer. And so what can we do is just be as kind as we can, exemplify God, be like God, be godly, emulate God. And if we do that, then hopefully we can merit what we have and we deserve what we have.
Wow, thank you, Rabbi. And that's a perfect stopping spot for today. And I'm looking forward, Rabbi, to our next episode of Breakneck Through the Bible.
Can't wait. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Breakneck Through the Bible by Torch Dallas. Visit torchdallas.net for more mind-expanding episodes that will forever change how you read the Bible.